Let me ask you this. What does financial freedom mean to you? Let's take it one step further and let me ask you, do you have a plan for achieving financial freedom? If you don't, you're definitely going to want to listen to this show. My guest today is Florida investor Tyler Sheff. Tyler is going to tell you how he got serious about achieving financial freedom, and he did that in just 11 months. You're also going to learn why it's never too late to start your journey to financial freedom through real estate investing. Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today. My guest, Tyler Sheff, is the founder of the Cash Flow Guys podcast, which is, by the way, an awesome podcast. Tyler's real estate investing philosophy is to build wealth by finding problems, not properties. He's a licensed agent, he's an educator and a syndicator. And in addition to focusing on multifamily properties these days, his other main focus is traveling the world. Well, welcome to the show, Tyler.
Hey, Sharon, thanks for having me back again.
Well, I'm excited because I've been following you on your journey, and that's what we're going to talk about today, achieving financial freedom with Tyler Sheff. That's a big topic.
That is a big topic. I'll be at about 4 hours for this episode.
So for those people that might not be familiar with your background, tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you got started.
Well, for me, I got started in the Army. I did my 5-year tour in the Army, and I found it really easy to be institutionalized, right? I prospered in the military. I liked structure, and I liked having that paycheck that showed up every month. And I'll never forget the feeling of when the day I got out of the Army, I was playing tug of war with a lady behind the counter with my military ID, right? Because that military ID is kind of like a credit card. You never have to pay off. You don't have to worry about going to the doctor. You can always have a free meal, always have a place to stay, something to drive. They just take care of your every whim. And that feeling was overwhelming when I was literally handing that back, right? Now you may think, well, if that's the case, Tyler, why wouldn't you just stay in and make a career out of it? Well, the short answer is because I was 22 years old and thought I knew all the answers to life's problems, and I was going to make $1 million in my first year, and everything was going to be fine. But that's kind of how it all started. And then from there, I did a lot of different things. I flipped houses back before the market crashed. I flipped houses, and over the years, I learned that I was really good at sales. I was good at closing. I enjoyed talking to people, and I enjoyed the psychology of closing a sale. So for me, that led to, I've worked in the car business, in the service department. I sold cars for a while. No, I wasn't that smarmy guy with the leisure suit, that type of thing. But one of the challenges I had with sales, although I loved the process, is I didn't want to be that sleazebag.
Yeah.
That they expect you to be, right? I'm not like, when I sold cars, I had to sell new cars. I couldn't bear to sell used cars. I couldn't do it. It's like, no. So that served me well. That, life training served me really well when I got into real estate. And my mom was a real estate broker, so I was kind of raised in it. And again, I had the mindset that I could just show up and that people would throw money at me. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case, which led me to flipping houses. I started doing that, even though I was advised not to. And that went really well for me until it didn't, as they say, right? Wow. Being sweet and charming as I try to be, I didn't really think that I needed to declare all those sales that I had in 2005, and filed my 1040 EZ, thinking I was doing the right thing, not really thinking much about it because I was having too much fun flipping houses and partying down in Key West. And I got a bill from the IRS, which was kind of a wake-up call for me.
A big bill?
Yeah, huge bill, a 6-figure bill with interest and penalties. And I thought, oh boy. And, they send a letter saying, if you don't pay this, you're going to go to jail. So that led me to going down to the IRS building, which I don't recommend. And then trying to get them to see my line of thinking, which I don't recommend. And really it led to, I had to get a job, Sharon, because I needed to be able to commit to structured payments for them, or they're going to throw me in the pokey. That led me to a job working for the federal government, right? Because what could possibly go wrong there? Well, nothing. I mean, I made great money. That was all fine and dandy. But the problem was, in about 1.5 years, 2 years, I was able to pay off the IRS. So I kept myself out of trouble. I didn't have any federal tax liens to worry about, nothing like that. Everything went great. I paid the piper. But after that deduction came off my paycheck because they took it right out, right? They helped themselves and let me have what's left over.
Mm-hmm.
I kept looking at my paycheck, Sharon, and I'm like, why is I have so much here in the top line?
Mm-hmm.
But by the time it's done, now that that IRS deduction is no longer there, why am I still
Mm-hmm.
basically on the poverty level? That shouldn't be the case. And what I realized is that the IRS was double dipping. I mean, I worked for the government. I didn't work for the IRS, but I worked for an organization called NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And I would work sometimes 40 to 80 hours overtime every pay period, which my overtime rate was around $60 an hour at the time, which
Wow.
I'm making really good money.
Yeah.
But my take home pay was almost none. And I thought, there's got to be a different way I can go about this because at this rate, I'm just going to work myself into the grave and I'm not going to have anything to show for it. That's when I tripped over for the second time in my life, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And that changed it all for me right there.
Mm-hmm. That book has changed more lives because for me, and it changed really the core of the way I think because I grew up with my dad was a general contractor.
Right.
And what I remembered was it was hard to make money. I mean, we had really good times and then we had winter in Louisville, Kentucky. So his thing was always having the money to keep his help so he didn't have to start over in the fall
Right.
or in the spring. So when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it just changed the way I think in that, gosh, you don't have to do business that way. You can do it a different way. I think for me, I didn't grow up with my parents. That book fundamentally has changed the way people think more than any other book on the planet.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's funny. When I first read the book, it was several years prior to that, and I got through the first chapter, and my impression at the time was, and I was not very mature, I guess, this isn't for me because I don't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
They kept talking about the rich don't work for money and yada yada. I'm like, well, I'm not rich, so clearly this book is not for me.
Yeah.
And like an idiot, I put the book down, didn't pick it up for several more years. And then the second time when I actually read the whole book, you know, all the way to the end, all the pages, not just the ones I liked. You know, I didn't scan for pictures. I read the whole book. It was just like, oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
what have I done?
Mm-hmm. So was that the point at which you decided, so you did the rehabs, then we all just kind of survived 2008.
Right.
Was it after 2008 when you started with rental properties?
It was. So my exit from flipping real estate, I wound up as a landlord kind of by accident, but also on purpose, if this makes any sense. And I'll briefly explain. I was having trouble sourcing new capital, right? Because I didn't know how to raise money back then. I wasn't even a thing and I didn't know that there was such a thing as real estate meetings or any of that. So for me, I had these projects and the market started to slow down and I had these houses and I thought, well, if they were still appreciating about 25% per year back then. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Let me be a little bit greedy. I'm going to put tenants in these things and rent them. I'm going to hold them for a year. And I did. And then I wound up holding them for a second year. So in 2 years, basically the value went up by about 42% across the portfolio. Wow. So I wasn't a landlord by design. I was a landlord by convenience, basically, so they would pay the bills so I didn't have to. In the meantime, I liked the cash flow, but I liked the big paydays of closings more. My brain wasn't screwed on right back then. So I sold the whole portfolio before the crash, not because I knew there was a crash coming. I had no idea. I mean, I was clueless. I mean, I read it a couple months later in the paper. I'm like, oh, goody. Glad I passed that one. And that's where I made my biggest mistake is that's where I didn't have a tax planner. I didn't hire a CPA. I didn't do any of that. That's what got me in hot water with the IRS. I didn't become a landlord by design until 2014. That was when I was already working for the government. I'd been with the government for several years. And I was that whole tax problem, right? I was getting nuked in taxes. So for me, when I was Google searching how to avoid paying tax legally being the key word, because we tried the other way, that doesn't work so much for Tyler. My charm apparently has no impact on the IRS. I learned that if I change how I earn my money, and I apply the cash flow quadrant, right? And I go focus on the B and the I quadrant, that I can literally either completely reduce or eliminate my taxes depending on how I do it. And that's what I've done ever since. And that's changed the game for me.
So you mentioned something curious that people think they need $10,000 a month to retire. And that's not the case because there are people I'm sure that maybe do that. But what is your definition of financial freedom for you?
For me, it's where I have the money coming in that comes in is, I like to think of it as essentially purely passive. I have managers in place and things like that, so I don't have to do anything to earn it. But the income that comes in exceeds my expenses. Now, everybody has their own definition of by what, how much is that. For me, I wanted to make sure that I had twice as much coming in as I needed to live. That was just my
Okay.
safety blanket. And for us, one of the first things we did is we eliminated our debt. And I know for a lot of you listen to this, you're probably thinking, well, that's easier said than done, Tyler. I got 20 grand in credit card debt. I got 100 grand in student loans. I'm here to tell you it's absolutely possible. Some of you laugh when they say this, especially coming from me, because I was not a big advocate of him early on, but I am now as a Dave Ramsey. I started following Dave Ramsey's teachings about how to pay down the debt, use the debt snowball, the whole 9 yards. And Jill and I were able to completely wipe our debt. Well, I didn't realize that we were out of the rat race until one day I was sitting down paying bills and there was really nothing to do. Jill was at work. I was at home. I sat down once a month to pay the bills and I looked and there was really nothing for me to do because the mortgage is already paid. There were no credit card bills because we paid them all off. And that was it. I was like, I called her at work. I'm like, I think we're out of the rat race. It sounds crazy to think about it, but I think we're out of the rat race. And we were. And then it came down to for us deciding when does it make sense for her to quit her job. She hung on for probably another year. Mainly that was because of the medical insurance thing. My wife has MS. So we had to time it right as far as the medical issues and things like that. We had to make sure we weren't cutting our nose off to spite our face. But it just blows me away that how much passed by me that I wasn't even realizing as far as being financially free, that I was so close all along. There were so many times that I flipped a house and the proceeds from that would have easily paid off my credit cards, but I chose not to do that. I would go buy another house and then maybe I lost money on that one. So I kept passing up all these opportunities, to get out of the rat race, not even realizing how simple it was. It's mind blowing to me looking back on it.
Well, don't you think though, we don't know what we don't know. And
True.
You kind of nailed it that you have to have a plan.
Yeah.
And if, like most house flippers, that's what, and even investors, that's what they're doing. So it's not that they're buying new cars. They're just spending their money in a different way. But I love the fact that you say twice as much as you need. And then if you decide you need more, you can do that. But that's a workable formula that I think almost anybody can understand is, that they can probably, like you said, achieve financial freedom way sooner than what they thought was possible.
True. I got a lot of pushback from friends and family initially. My mother to this day, she's finally figured out in about the last 2 years. She's like, what? When was the last time you had a job? Are you on some sort of public assistance? I'm like, the last time I worked was 2014. It's now 2020. It's like, yeah, Mom, I've tried to explain to you. That's what apartment buildings will do for you. They just keep giving you money every month.
They just give you money.
Exactly. And a lot of folks didn't quite get it. A lot of friends that we had kind of wondered if, Tyler, what are you up to? Are you up to something strange that you can't talk about? I'm like, no, we buy small multifamily buildings. We fix them up and we hold them. It's pretty boring. Not very sexy. It doesn't make headlines, but boy, it pays well.
So you read Dave Ramsey's book, which allowed you to go about paying off debt in a different way, because I know that is a stumbling block for so many people.
It is.
And I look at my granddaughter now she's a sophomore in college, and the debt that it takes, and it's just so scary. These kids come out of school with all that debt. And
they do.
So I think people sometimes they just look around and go, there's just no way I can do this, so I'll just go on like I'm going on. But at what point do people need a plan? Like yesterday? If they, I mean, really and truly, if you want to retire at whatever age, you need a plan.
You absolutely do. And I don't think people realize our culture has changed. In the 1950s, there was this, people didn't take on credit unless maybe it was at the local grocery. It was very simple. But these days, my oldest daughter, when she got into college, one of the first things she came home with was an American Express card.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm like, why do you have an American Express card? She's 18. Well, because they gave it to me, and look, they gave me a $15,000 credit limit. I almost had a heart attack. I'm like, okay.
Oh my God.
So here are 107 reasons why we need to cut that up. It's your decision, but we need to. if you want a credit rating, I'll put you on some of my cards as an authorized user and give you the rating that way. But I don't think that makes sense. The culture breeds this. We have been raised, our generation, the next generation, and the generation after them have been raised that if it's okay, we don't have to be able to afford it. All we have to be able to afford is the payment. And I got to say, that's like the worst financial advice, worst mindset thing I've ever heard in my mind. But that's how it goes. And if you look for an example, right, our government, look, don't even get me started on our government. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you vote.
Yeah.
The government spends money like water. So why shouldn't we, right?
Yeah, that's another whole scary topic for sure.
Oh boy, that's for sure.
So you didn't really have a time, or maybe you did have subconsciously have a timeline in place. Did you have a broad plan in place?
We did.
Yourself?
So Jill and I sat down, and I was making well into the six figures working for the government. Very cushy job. I got to travel the world. I was on a ship. It was glamorous. I was in upper management. I mean, I had everything. The only thing that sucked about it, frankly, was the fact that I was on a ship and I was away from home a lot. If I could have my wife and kids with me, that would have made it perfect. Otherwise, everything was great. Well, that's a tough one to walk away from, but the family obviously wins supreme. So for us, it came down to how much do we need for basic survival every month? What is that number? And we came up with that number. And I think for us, the number was around $3,500, maybe $4,000 a month. That's what we needed. So that's we just kind of pulled it out of the air. Well, 4,000 is cool, but we need sleep at night, so let's figure out 8,000. Then we sat down and said, okay, I can't do much when I'm on a ship in the middle of the ocean. And Jill's at work 40, 50 hours a week and driving back and forth and commuting in the whole 9 yards. So we got to come up with a metric. How are we going to do this? So what I did is I went back to work, and because I was getting taxed so high, I started really looking into how can I get around this tax issue. And one of the ways was to take what they call comp time. The government will give you compensatory time that you can take time off instead of the overtime pay. Oh. So when I did the math, it made more sense for me to have the time off, because while I had the time off, I could then start focusing on buy and hold real estate, which is exactly what I did. I banked a whole bunch. I took all my overtime and converted it into comp time, which gave me 6 months paid leave.
Wow.
And although government didn't really like it, my supervisor wasn't giddy about me being gone for 6 months. I picked during an import period. We were in port over a winter, and I jumped ship during that 6 months. And we decided that if I could figure out a way to duplicate my income, or at least hit that $8,000 a month figure before I had to go back, then I would stay home.
Oh, wow.
Well, I had a real estate license for many years. I reactivated it. I let it lapse for a while. I put it inactive, and then I reactivated my real estate license. That was strategy one, right? Go out there and play realtor and see how that works. That did well, but not well enough. It wasn't consistent enough.
Yeah.
We're just recovering from a housing crash. We're talking about 2014. Things are not 100% back to swing yet. I started wholesaling, and then I realized that one of the skills that I had is negotiating. I'm really good at negotiating. I enjoy it. I'm very comfortable with it. What if I had put out what they call basically a negotiating service? Here's what it looked like. Let's say you want to go buy a house, or you're an investor, but you're not really that great of a negotiator. I will go negotiate your deal for you in exchange for a flat fee. And you'd be surprised. I got quite a few people lining up to do that. And basically what it worked is I got 25% of whatever I saved you. So if I knocked 10 grand off the price of the property, you paid me $2,500 fee. Real simple. It went really, really well. So hitting that $8,000 mark now was easy, because I was getting 4 or 5 customers a month just doing that for them, in addition to playing realtor and whatnot. And then, of course, we bought our first 4-plex, and that pretty much did it from there.
That is so interesting that you got creative in those different ways. I think more than ever today, you have to think about money differently.
Yes.
And that's what I just try to, maybe browbeat my granddaughter, say, I want you to think about money and be smart about money, because you can have whatever you want. You just can't have it all right now.
Right.
And so it really upsets me that they don't teach a financial education in schools, that these kids don't come out of school with some sort of idea of how to budget and spend money and save money, because then they go off to college, they get married or whatever that is they do, and they start their lives and they still are lacking these basic skills. And it drives me absolutely insane, because they could escape the rat race so much sooner
Yeah.
if they just knew, or they could stay working and, have a lot more money, whatever, but they don't have the skills.
Robert Kiyosaki, in one of his books, I think it was Second Chance, said that the government, the schools, they're there to create employees. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And when you come out of school, they've done their best to make you an employee. The only ones that wind up not being an employee are the ones that are strong enough to push through all that. And that's hard. You train somebody for 12 years if you graduate high school, and add another 8 years to that if you go to college, 4 years, 8 years, whatever. It's very hard to overcome that. It's such a huge thing. But I think one good thing that I see is this whole gig economy thing that's going on right now is great.
It's great.
You got these kids that can grab a iPhone and open a YouTube channel, and next thing you know, they're making $100,000 a year. Yep. I see it turning around in the future, but I think it's going to be a while before we get there.
Well, I've noticed even with the different young people that I know, they're very much into gigs. They don't even think about getting like one more solid job. They're out driving Uber Eats one night, and then they've got a nanny job, and they've got all these different jobs, and for them it's normal. So I think in a sense they think more like that's more of an entrepreneurial thing of, let me see how I can make money, rather than let me get a job at Walgreens,
right? Being the working stiff.
Yeah.
I see a lot of times people I talk about, I'm like, what? They're like flipping houses, and they're in the 6th year of flipping houses, and there's no end in sight. And I ask them, what stops you from flipping houses? And a lot of times people say, well, I don't want to just go buy a property and then only get $100 or $200 a month. I'm like, really? So you're just going to buy one rental property? Mm-hmm. And for that matter, who says it has to only cash flow $100 or $200? Where are you fishing, first of all? Second of all, for people that, a lot of people I've seen they don't think through the whole process. Sometimes you attract, I believe there's a difference between two different ways you can earn your income. You can earn it in piles, or you can earn it in streams. Mm-hmm. Streams is my preference. Actually, the license plate on my Jeep says Streams, really? Florida, and says Streams. That's because I search for streams of income. What can I do to bring in income that drips? I've got coaching students on monthly things. I've got subscription services out there, things like that, where I can get streams of income. I've got realtors that work for me as buyer's agents. Those turn into piles, right? They may not sell anything for a month, and then suddenly they sell 3, so that creates a pile. Just because it comes in as a pile, or let's say you go out and do something that makes you a one-time big hit, think about how you can break that down and make it last. Instead of putting it in your checking account or going out and splurging and buying dinner and a vacation, maybe divide that by, 12. And then pay yourself every month a little bit of that, a little chunk of that. Mm-hmm. That's how you start getting on the train to getting financially free. Obviously, step one is to get out of debt, at least unsecured debt, but then take these larger chunks and break them up and make them last. I think a lot of people miss that.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. That's kind of the way they pay teachers. They work 9 months, and they give them a 12-month income. So it's a similar concept, and I'd be willing to bet you no one has thought about doing that when they get those big chunks of cash. They're not thinking about that. What would you say as far as building a runway to getting out of the rat race and having passive income? Is there a minimum number of years you think someone can achieve it?
No, and I think doing so undermines your abilities to do things. If I had done that, I got out of the rat race in 11 months. Jill and I exited the rat race. From the time we said we're getting out of the rat race, it took us 11 months to get it together. Is that abnormal? Maybe. But a lot of that came down to really getting centered on where you are. You can't begin to forecast what it's going to take until you first know where you are. And that was a huge one for us. And that means going through the pain of writing down every single thing, what we spend money on. For us, that's what it was. For example, subscription services. Personally, just Tyler had $300 and some odd a month going out of my wallet, out of my bank account by auto debit.
Yeah.
And that's of the stuff that I don't even use.
Yeah.
It gets sucked in. It's a $10 here. It's $20 here. It's $50 there. Next thing you know, you're equivalent of a car payment. or better yet, a mortgage payment is
Yeah.
going out the window. So you got to get centered in where you are financially. What do you have going out right now? And that said, what can you do to eliminate waste? I'm not suggesting anybody lives like a pauper. I certainly didn't, but you can live a heck of a lot more responsibly if you can stop the unnecessary, the bleeding, the whatnot. Do you really have to go to the club every Friday night, no matter what,
Yeah.
and buy a bottle of Cristal and spend $500 to impress the ladies? No, you don't. Do you have to go out to dinners 4 nights of the week? Well, these days they'll send you a meal in a box that if you could read, you can make a nice meal. I mean, they've made it pretty simple.
Yeah.
So these things are all possible, but it all begins with that first step of having a real come to Jesus, if you will, with yourself, is saying, okay, where exactly am I?
Mm.
And then realistically, what is it going to take? What's the next step to get me close to where I got to go? That begins with paying the debt, right? How can I make more money? Maybe you could work an extra hour a day if the boss lets you and get overtime. Maybe you could pick up a side gig, a side hustle, whatever they call it these days. There are 100 different ways to do this. Negotiating with your car insurance company. I tell people that, it blows their mind. Like, you can do that? Like, yeah, you can actually do that.
Yeah.
Call your cable company and tell them you want a better deal. Renegotiate everything you have now, because that skill of negotiation is probably one of the most critical ones you can ever have, as you know, as an investor. So start there. You can beat the insurance company and you can beat your Verizon Wireless account rep in Zimbabwe, then negotiating a house is going to be simple, really.
Yeah, I know we have to do that periodically. Suddenly your things start going up, like your cable bill, and
Yeah.
for no reason at all. I'm impressed that you like negotiating, because for me, I can do it. I can do it successfully, but I can't honestly say that that's my thing. Uh,
For
it's
me, it's the psychology of it. It's fascinating to see what makes people tick, what I say, and how they react. I've been a student of learning how to write direct response copy, which is very psychological. And
Mhm.
I really enjoy learning what makes people react a certain way, or how they feel. And I had to convince myself, it's one of those things you got to have a talk with yourself every once in a while. It's not always been fun, and it used to be uncomfortable, but I decided that it didn't need to be uncomfortable,
Mhm.
that I could convince myself that this isn't going to hurt you. You're not going to die afterwards. You may sound stupid, but that's okay.
Mhm.
And then I started feeling better about it.
Mhm. Well, I'm really good at building rapport with people, so I think for me, it just kind of evolved into a natural
Yeah.
thing where I could have a conversation. I had to, not being a person who just knows they're not good at sales, would never want to do, say, like sell cars. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine doing that job, because for me it would be very hard. But
Right.
I'm really good at having conversations. So once I did the mindset trick, it was kind of like with speaking. I would had to tell myself it's not really speaking. You're just having a conversation with those people sitting out there. Then it changes everything. But your mindset is huge in all of this. And the fact that you can figure out where your roadblocks are is huge.
It is. And, going back to the mindset of it all, you can say that it's negotiating or whatnot, but to your point, how I negotiate is exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Is I focus on building relationships. I ask a lot of questions. And when
Mhm.
I make an offer, it's an offer that specifically addresses the seller situation.
They're
Not,
paying.
yeah, I don't make offers on properties that I can't talk to the seller. And if I don't know what the problem is, I don't even make an offer at all. For me, it's not worth it. Otherwise, what do they base it on? Price?
Yeah. I
And at
mean,
that point, nobody wants to haggle over price. That's just no fun.
no, if they're all in it for price, and I've been in situations where I built a relationship with the seller, and maybe my price wasn't the best price, but they
Right.
just felt comfortable working with me. So there's great power in knowing and mastering the art of conversation. And to your point,
Yes.
that really is negotiation. You
Yes.
understand their situation, you take the time to listen, which is something a lot of people they grapple with that. They just want in and out, and they don't really want to hear about what is their actual situation and what do they really need other than money.
Exactly. A lot of folks I talk to don't really understand the difference between listening to respond versus listening to understand.
Mm-hmm.
I see that a lot in everyday life. And one of the things and it's been tough because I was the guy that would listen to respond
Mm-hmm.
as if I thought I was in some sort of a joust, right? When I started to change, and Toastmasters helped me a lot with this, going to Toastmasters and sitting in there. And then there's a job called the grammarian where you have to listen to everything they say and then judge the grammar. It was painful because I really had to focus, but I'm glad I did it because it helped me really listen to what people are saying. And the more I listen to what you're saying, I'm now not I'm only listening so that I can understand what you're saying. It makes for a better conversation. You've heard conversations to where the other person just keeps talking over you.
Yeah.
I've done that. I mean, I've had that on the phone where people are like, I can't get a word in edgewise. Finally, I just hang up. I'm like, just okay.
Yeah.
When you're done, you call me back. Or I'll set the phone down, walk away. I'm like, you tucker yourself out, and when you're done talking, then we'll continue.
That's funny.
But if you can master that one thing, if you can master the art of listening, if you can really, really, really focus on listening and become a good listener, negotiating becomes simple.
Yeah.
Because if you know that I've heard and I understand exactly what you're saying, you're going to automatically be engaged with it because you've put you in a position of power. You feel as if you're being paid attention to.
Yeah.
I don't know about the rest of the guys listening to this, but how many times have your wife caught you on Facebook when she wants to talk about something important, right? You're not paying attention. You agree. And she'll Jill does this. She throws things out there on purpose, knowing that I'm not paying attention just so she can Zoom me. It's like, oh boy, I gotta really keep it together. But that's the key really is getting focused on listening so you can understand what they're saying and comprehend.
Great point there. So I want to circle back just a minute to people that are maybe 50, 60 years old or beyond.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you got out of the rat race in 11 months. So people think they're too old. That
Not true.
And that's my feeling that's not true. So speak to that. Now you did it and they're going to go, oh, but that's Tyler. But that's Tyler.
Yeah. I'm supposedly different than everybody else. Not true. I'm just like everybody else. I have all the same insecurities. I make all the same dumb mistakes, probably more than most people do. But going back to that, first of all, you got to figure out where you are, right? What do you need? If I told you tomorrow that all you could get is Social Security, how much is that number? Is that number $1,200 a month, $1,100 a month? Good. Does that cut it? If the answer is I don't know, then we need to stop what we're doing and start with I'm going to wait until I got to sit down and figure out what that looks like. I'm having that discussion right now with family members to where they have lived for the majority of their life above their means.
Mm-hmm.
And they are now retired trying to, and this is my mom, I'm trying to explain to her that, mom, you have only so much money out there. You really can't live beyond your means at this stage of the game, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'm picking up the tab. And a lot of the folks that are trying to retire don't really know where they are. They still have a $700 car payment. It's like, okay, I'm going to say it again, a $700 car payment. I know lots of people that have a $700 car payment. You can buy a lot of real estate with $700 a month. A lot of real estate. How important is it in the grand scheme of things for you to be driving that big Suburban all decked out with the spinners and the gold and whatever at 65 years old when you don't even have your retirement set up? Mm-hmm. So yes, you have to make some strategic changes, I'll call them. They're not really sacrifices because you may give up the Suburban, right, and wind up with a Toyota Camry that's a couple of years old. But at the end of the day, you're going to wake up every morning refreshed, knowing that you can actually survive the day because you've got money coming in no matter what, instead of money coming out. And the thing that keeps people in financial prison is not the lack of what's coming in. It's no control over what's going out.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you that.
Well, that's a great point. So let me ask you this. You make the decision that this is possible for you and Jill, and mm-hmm. you all get your plan. What about your business? I mean, I know that you had good systems in place before, and but there are certainly things you might have had to alter or change or pick up, things that if you're truly going to drive to California and be on the road for weeks, you don't want to be thinking about all these things falling through the cracks. Right. So how did you address that?
For us, it wound up, we spent a lot of time, and this is probably the biggest challenge that we had, is finding people that we could trust and that were trainable to mm-hmm. take over things for us. That said, we had to reprogram our minds. I was of the type where I'm used to being in charge of things, and I'm of everything, and it was very hard for me to let that go. But I also I was kind of a tightwad. I didn't put a lot of value in the job of being a manager. So I flipped a switch one day and said, I'm just going to change things. I'm just going to make a decision. I'm going to bite the bullet. And I said to my first property manager, I said, here's the deal. You want 10%? He said, yeah. Okay, here's the deal. I'm going to give you 15%. You're not going to ever call me. How about that? You solve the problems, make it work. And he said, fine. And that worked swimmingly for many, many years until he retired and got out of the business. Then I had to start all over again. If you find good people and you pay them well, it will save you considerable sums of money in the long run. I'm here to tell you. I know a lot of people say, oh, that's crazy. If I can save $1, if I can beat up the property manager and get him to do it for 8% or 5% or whatever, then I'm winning. You're not winning. What you're doing is you're attracting the wrong type of people, the people that have control over whether your asset either wins or loses. It all starts there. Getting on board with, make them a partner in the deal. And I don't mean that in literal sense, but make them invested in the deal. Hey, look, if we have no vacancy for 12 months, no turnover, I'm going to bonus you half of 1 month's rent at the end of the year. Think of ways you can incentivize the people in your team to perform. I've done this with, I do this when I buy properties. I go talk to the listing agents and say, tell you what, I'm going to make it real easy and we're going to take your commission off the table. I'm going to pay your commission and I'm going to pay you 7%. I know you're probably not getting that from the seller, but let's make it easy on the seller. I will pay your compensation. How about that? Now we can talk about brass tacks. So what have I just done? I've empowered the agent. I actually gave them a pay raise over what they were getting. They were on the other side of the table for the seller. Now they're paying attention. Now I have their audience, right? Now we can talk about things like terms and all this other stuff. Anytime I can bring somebody in and incentivize them to do something out of the ordinary, or basically just, which in some cases, maybe just doing your job, please follow through and I'll pay you better, because it's worth it to me to do that. And I know that sounds probably crazy, but it's that people do things because they're motivated to do them. Right. And when it comes down to it, when the phone rings, if a property manager gets calls all day and all night, I want him to take care of me first. Mm-hmm. And he's not going to take care of me first if he's also got Sharon.
Yeah.
And Sharon pays him 5% more. Yeah. With a smile. He's automatically going to focus on you. And I'm an only child. I want everybody to focus on me. So I'm just going to pay you better to focus on me.
I've always done that with my VAs, my offshore VAs. If they wanted so much an hour, I always paid them more. I always had exactly the same philosophy. If they have to choose whose work to do, I want them to choose mine. And with them, it wasn't a huge outlay of cash, but giving them a few more dollars an hour was a huge impact.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
I know one time you told me that you got a lot of leads from your podcast, and I see that your podcast is still going out. Don't we love all those services that can make that happen?
Yes.
What happens today? I mean, do you still get leads from your podcast? Are you still buying anything?
Constantly, and yes, we buy when the numbers make sense. Okay, so that said, there's a lot of folks right now that are testing the market, and you always get that number of people. Admittedly, it's been about a year and a half since we've closed on anything for ourselves, and that's because the market's at the highest than it's ever been. I'm not a big believer in there being necessarily the market, but these folks, if they need to exit at a certain price point, let them. Right? If I can solve a problem with my offer, I like to do things creatively. I'm not the kind of guy that just writes checks willy-nilly and hope it'll cash flow later. I have to go in with a plan that makes sense, because I really enjoy being out of the rat race. I don't want a deal to put me back in the rat race. I've sold too many of those for clients over the years. Like, what happened? What'd you do? Did you not listen to my show? I don't know what you're missing. But yeah, we will absolutely still acquire. We like small and medium-sized multifamily properties. That's our focus. We stay laser focused on that. Don't go outside, we don't paint outside the lines. That's where we like to be. And if something comes across our way and it makes sense, then we'll absolutely drop an offer on it and close on it. It hasn't been our biggest focus right now. I'll say, I don't like to say enough, but we have enough to be comfortable at this stage of the game. Mm-hmm. Our focus right now, my wife has MS. So our focus is getting her, that's a debilitating disease. At some point, she'll wind up completely disabled. So we've been traveling to try to get her around the country and enjoy the things and see all the fun stuff. So we're having our fun now. We don't want to wait until we're too old to enjoy it. So we're having our fun now. We are still doing, obviously, the podcast, but for me, that's more of a labor of love. Mm-hmm. I'm really happy how that has turned out, and we've helped a lot of people, and we still continue to help a lot of people. So still staying on with that. I still do some coaching on a very small scale. I've got an inner circle group that I work with. Mm-hmm. So we stay pretty active in that, but yeah, that's what we've been up to.
Well, that's just awesome. I wondered how that worked with you. I felt sure you were still getting leads. It's nice to be able to pick and choose, though, isn't it?
It
Once
is.
you don't need a deal to pay your mortgage or whatever, then you get to choose. And I think it's very freeing in that um, it's more fun for one thing because you get to cherry pick. But there's a whole thing. You probably remember this from back when you started, when you really need a deal. I've got to find a deal. And then you start doing funny math and all kinds of things you don't want to do. So,
Right.
well, Tyler, this has been a phenomenal podcast, but I knew that it would be because people need to pick me up today with all this COVID
Oh boy,
stuff.
they sure do.
They need to know that the American dream is not totally down the drain and that there's still possible for them. And I talk to a lot of people, they go, oh gosh, I'm 55, I'm too late. And I'll go, no, you're not. No,
No.
you're not. So, do you have any burning final advice for people that want to, everybody wants to be Tyler and Jill on the road, right? So,
I don't know. It's hot and miserable out there sometimes. You better be careful what you wish for. We've had some interesting situations out there on the road, but my advice is it is never too late to start. We started later in life. I see a lot of guys and girls coming in now in their 20s. That excites me. They're young. My daughter just bought her first house a couple years ago, and she's getting well on her way, and that's exciting. But I don't care if you're 70 years old. It's never too late to start. There's lots of opportunity out there. Don't let people tell you the market's too hot or there's no deals to be had. That's just not true. Get out there, talk to people, solve problems. You will put deals together, and you can absolutely make money.
Great advice, and great as always catching up with you.
As well.
I'm glad you landed someplace where you had internet so we could finally do this interview.
That's been a challenge, let me tell you.
Yeah. Tell everybody what the best way is to get in touch with you and about your podcast before we sign off here.
So my podcast is the Cash Flow Guys podcast. It's available on all the podcasts, any podcast catcher out there, iTunes, all that good stuff, Stitcher. The best way to reach me is through my website, cashflowguys.com. That's cashflowguys.com. You can email me there, and you can see all of our training and videos and all that good stuff. So,
yeah, and I can vouch for this. Is a guy who really he knows what he's talking about. So
thank you, Sharon.
Be sure to check it out. And he's having way too much fun though. So I'll be back, guys. If you like this show, please share it, and we'd be honored if you'd leave us a review and a rating. And I will see you same time, same place next week. Thanks again, Tyler. Bye.
Thank you.